distractions, we'll get away. This is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free with me. Let's be free with me. Be free. Not looking back, eyes on the freeway, Bonnie and Clyde, a classic cliche. We're on the run, this is what we waited for. Take my hand, we'll make it somehow. We can't miss out. I'm done living life with the lights out. Die with my own doubts. Be free.
Lightning strikes by my window, hits my chest right in the morning, like a warning. Could have slept here for days. I felt your heartbeat, felt your mouth breathe, but it's not real. We were close to see the sun, but clouds got in our way, and so
Well, hello, everybody. It's time for One Word on Sunday night, and I'm glad you're here. I'm Tim Riddle, and just thanks for tuning in. If you've had a chance to do that, whether you're watching it live or maybe you're watching it on the replay, but just a time that we gather together on Sunday night, group of people where we want to maybe chaos is going on in our lives or our world, or certainly busyness. I don't know anybody that doesn't have a lot of things going on that's distracting. And so we just focus on one word that we can put a spotlight on for the week, perhaps to help us to be a better leader, a better influencer, maybe just a better person. And sometimes it's, I don't know if you're like me, but I can have a long list of things that I need to work on. And sometimes if I simplify it and just put a spotlight on one thing and do that well, go really deep with that this week, then perhaps that improves my leadership, helps me take a step forward, and just be a nicer person. So glad that you're here. Hey, put a hello or a comment or something in the chat if you would. Let me know that you're out there. If you're watching this live, it's always encouraging to make sure that we don't feel like that we're just out there in cyberspace talking to an empty room. So take a minute to do that. All right. Tonight's word was influenced for me by some experiences I've had in my life and in my leadership, but particularly lately, for some reason, it just seems like that it's, I've been able to uncover, should I say, some dysfunctions, or maybe some improvements that could happen. And here's the word. The word is communication. I don't know about you, but I don't think we ever master communication. I know of the organizations I've ever been with or been a part of, or anytime I've worked with a company, and we did a survey of the staff and said, hey, what are areas that we can improve on? No matter how good we are, the top thing all the time was communication. And I get it. I know the world gets crazy, but tonight I just want to talk about what I would consider some of the low-hanging fruit. Some of the things that it doesn't take a lot of effort to communicate better. And so that's where we're going to spend our time tonight. Now, when we start, here's one thing that I wanted to mention, and that is, there are really three different types of communicators. All right. So in other words, see if you fall in one of these categories. And so these are, when I mean three different types of communicators, I'm talking about three different types of bad communicators. They usually fall in one of these three areas. All right, here we go. The first one is the confusing communicator. All right. We've all either done that or been the recipient of that. I know for sure. For example, I have someone that will email me, and it's not a long email. We know the confusing communicator that writes the epistle, where when you get it, you think, oh my goodness, it's going to take forever to try to figure this out. I don't have enough time. But this is this particular person, when they send me an email, it's usually just one or two lines. Sometimes it's no more than a couple of sentences. But I kid you not, 9 out of 10 times when I read it, I have to say, I have no idea what they just said. In other words, it's like I'm reading a foreign language. It's not that it's, they're talking about something difficult. It's not that they're talking about something that's confusing or something that I don't understand intellectually. It's just their communication style is so cryptic. And you can tell they're doing it really quick, misspelled words, grammar's not right, and they're just communicating in a way that's hard to understand, and it causes you, like this picture that I have here, it causes you to just put your hands up, kind of gives you a headache, right? The confusing communicator. The next category is the clueless communicator. Now, I'm going to share a story. I debated on whether I would do this or not, and so I thought, well, let's just give you a real life example. So recently I've had to order some computer equipment. Now I use a Mac, but I was ordering some monitors and I thought, am I going to call this company out? Well, yeah, I am. So I ordered them from Dell. I had to order for a couple, for me and a teammate, a couple of monitors and so forth. So we've ordered a decent amount over the past, maybe 8 weeks or so, 8 or 9 weeks. One of them we had to send back. It took a month and a half to get the issue resolved. Literally 8 to 10 emails, phone calls, things of that nature. But finally, the last time I emailed and I said, I'm going to give you one more chance to see if you can make it right. So I ordered the monitor. It shipped 24 hours later, which they're pretty good at that. I do think they have good product. And so then it ended up supposed to be delivered on like a Friday. It wasn't. It's supposed to be delivered on a Saturday. It wasn't. It's supposed to be delivered on Sunday. It wasn't. Finally, Monday, we find out that FedEx says, we don't know where it is. We've lost it. So I reached back out to Dell, trying to figure out what's going on. Wait, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So now I'm almost a week and a half into the fact that I've already paid for it. And so I'm reaching out to customer service, numerous emails, numerous phone calls. I'm trying to solve the issue for them. And finally, towards the end of, I guess it was this past week, I get an email random out of customer service that was nicely written that says, we're so sorry this happened. It looks like your monitor is lost with FedEx. We're trying to resolve the issue, and hopefully within the next week and a half, we might send you another monitor in replacement. And so I lost it. Literally, it was like, you've got to be kidding. Email wasn't rude. The email was clueless, just like my little image that's on my screen here says. They're clueless. One department has no idea what the other department does. Hopefully they'll figure that out, but they are, as an organization, at least in my experience, a clueless communicator. Not bad people, but so many times we see organizations that communicate in that clueless manner. All right, here's the third one. The careless communicator. This is the most dangerous one because the careless communicator can ruin relationships at the snap of the fingers. The careless communicator is someone who's insensitive. It's someone who sometimes feels entitled. So they feel like, well, I've been doing this for a long time. I can say whatever I want to say. I can do whatever I want to do. And so they communicate carelessly. They don't listen. Sometimes they fall in the category of those that just don't respond. In other words, and sometimes they become entitled so much that they get upset when people don't respond to them, but they don't respond to anybody else. And so when they get upset, people are kind of scratching their heads saying, really? And so it can damage, almost, I've seen permanent relationships damaged over that type of a leader or communicator or person that does it in a careless way. So it's those are the three. So here we go. Confusing communicator, a clueless communicator, or a careless communicator. Post a comment as to which one you struggle with the most. And if you're really transparent, post the one that you feel like you might fit into that category every now and then. Kind of let me know how you feel. Let me put this quote up. That I saw. I'm going to read it here on my screen, but it says, in the Navy SEAL teams, there are 3 things we must do perfectly to be effective operators: move, shoot, and communicate. Pretty interesting, right? Move, shoot, and communicate. I got thinking about that, and I thought, how many times do we head out in life and we move and we shoot, but we forget to communicate? And people are scratching their heads because we're either confused in how we communicate, we're clueless in how we communicate, or we're careless in how we communicate. So it's so important that we make sure that communication is top on our list. All right. When I got to thinking about this one word, I thought of communication. I thought there are 2 problems that all of these, communication issues, they fit into these two buckets. There may be more, but these were two for me. First of all, we've got a quantity issue. Second of all, we have a quality issue. All right, so what do I mean by that? First of all, quantity. We don't communicate enough. I mean, we just don't. I mean, we're in a world where we have all this virtual, all these ways to communicate, our phones, our emails, our text messages, social media. But I'm surprised at how many times people have all of that, make that available to people, but never respond. I was at a conference earlier this year, and they brought up some leaders in the room, and they said, hey, we're going to give a prize for the person who has the most emails that are unread. That you haven't read the email, bring it up. There was someone who walked up that had 100,000 emails in their phone that had not been read. Now, here's the thing that happens. When you don't communicate virtually, I know we need to do it in person, but particularly today in a COVID-19 world, if you're not communicating virtually, you know what you're doing? You're allowing someone else to connect dots about you and your character and who you are that may not be true. I mean, it's just the way it is. If we don't communicate, we're allowing them to say, I assume by your lack of communication that you mean this, or that you're this type of a person. So important. My kids, they're all grown now, but my kids, when they were young, and I always say, when people ask about parenting advice, I can always say, hey, I can give you advice from today forward, but I can't get, or from today back, or what has happened, but you never know what's going to happen moving forward. And so, but one of the things, we're blessed that our kids have been great, but one of the things, it's not necessarily just, God has blessed us with great kids, but I will say this. One of the rules that we had, a lot of parents have a lot of rules, and I'm not against rules by any means. But here's the way we parented our kids. We said this one rule. There's only one rule, and that is the more you communicate, the more freedom you will have. So we didn't, create rules about having curfews and things like that. We always said, let's communicate about it. Let's talk about it. As long as we know where you are and what you're doing, the more freedom you have, within reason, obviously, of course. All right, the other bucket is the quality bucket. And that's just I'd probably throw in there, quality means clarity, communicating in a clear fashion, not being clear. And then here's the other one that I think as leaders grow, this is one they forget probably more than anything. And that is, when they communicate, they forget to think, who outside of this room needs to know this, right? In other words, they think, I'm just going to communicate and it'll just work its way out. And I know as I've become a victim of this at times, or become bad at this, I guess you would say at times. But I communicate. We've got 3 or 4 people in the room. Everybody's great. We all go do our thing. And then there's a whole team out there that's saying, what the heck is going on? Because we forget, oh, wait a minute, who outside of this room needs to know what we're communicating? So quantity and quality. All right, I'm going to leave you with 5 quick tips. So let me run through those for you really quick, and then we'll check and see if there's any comments that we can throw on the screen and discuss for a second. Number 1, communicate relentlessly. If I haven't made my point, communicate, right? I mean, one of the best ways to get better at communicating is communicate. So relentlessly. Now, I'm not talking about relentlessly where you just tell somebody over and over and over, and they're like, I got it. You don't have to tell me 1,000 times. But you know what I mean. Just make sure that you communicate. Don't leave people questioning or guessing as to what to do. Number 2, simplify. Make sure it's simple. In other words, there are different people that I communicate in my business. Some want just the Cliff's Notes, right? Others want a longer, dialogue, maybe a story or whatever. In other words, make sure that when you communicate, simplifying means I communicate in a way that the audience will understand, and it's not the same for every single person. In other words, how John receives my communication might be different than the way Jack does, or Sally does, or Jill does, or whatever. Make sure you communicate in a way that the person hearing it can understand. If they need visuals, give them visuals. If they need numbers, give them numbers. But communicate, make sure it's simple in how you do that. All right, number 3, listen or ask for input. One of the best ways to communicate is to listen, but one way of listening is ask for input. I know leaders that will say, yeah, nobody really gives me any input. And I want to say, yeah, because you give off this aura about you that you don't want input. Or maybe they've given you input, but you don't listen. You never take it into consideration. So they're tired of giving input. So make sure that you listen and ask. Be intentional about asking. Number 4, context is critical. Now, not too much context, all right? If you ask somebody, if they ask you what time it is, we don't need to build a watch, all right? We know some people like that, right? But context, so many times we communicate, but we never give the context. What do I mean by context? The why. This is what we want to do, and this is why we want to do it. Context, make sure that you include that in your communication. And then last, your actions, make sure they support your words. All right? You don't want to be like the video where the mouth doesn't line up with the words. The statement that said, what you are, speak so loudly I can't hear what you're saying. In other words, that's usually a character issue. We say one thing and we do another. So we have to make sure our actions line up with our words if we want our words to be understood and not be frustrating and to be clear and so forth. All right. So there's your 5 tips. Let's wrap this thing up. Let me look and see if we've got any comments out there. Couple here. Carly says, clueless because I find myself getting frustrated pretty quickly, not understanding how we are on such different pages. Yeah, and sometimes we have to be careful to make sure. I've done this before where I assume we're clueless, but it turns out maybe I communicated in a confusing manner, and I'm thinking, why don't you understand what I'm saying? But we've also had those situations where like my situation with Dell. Did I mention it was Dell that had that situation with them this week where it just felt like they were clueless? Jeff says, I like the saying that vision leaks. So you have to communicate it with clarity and consistency. I agree, Jeff. I heard a leader one time say, how do you cast vision? He said, you cast it, and then you cast it, and then you cast it. And then when you're done, you know what you do? You cast it, and you cast it, and you cast it. So absolutely, vision leaks for sure, and we have to continue. You can say communicate it, whatever you want to do. Make sure you communicate it often, and make sure you communicate it in the quality of communication ways that you can do that. All right, I have one thing to leave you with. Here's the last slide, and I love this quote. George Bernard Shaw says, the single biggest problem with communication is the illusion that it has taken place. How many times have we been guilty of that, or we've dealt with somebody in regards to that? We have this illusion that we're communicating clearly. I would call that in my world a blind spot. In other words, we think we're great communicators, but we're actually not, because we have this illusion that we're doing it well. So I challenge you this week to just think about communicating. And when you communicate, maybe stop and ask yourself, did I do that? Am I doing it with quantity, enough quantity? Am I doing it with quality? So that I make sure I don't have the illusion that I've actually communicated in an effective manner. All right. Have a great week. Thanks for popping in tonight, and I'll see you next Sunday. If you don't mind, share this if you would. See if we can get some more people joining. And again, just thanks for your time, and I hope you have a great